Long ago, in the land of Egypt, a kingdom of towering pyramids and mighty pharaohs, there rose a cry not from palaces, but from the oppressed. The descendants of Jacob, the sons of Israel, had come to Egypt generations earlier as welcome guests during a famine. But now, they were no longer honored. They were enslaved. The new Pharaoh had forgotten Joseph, the Hebrew who once saved Egypt. And as the Israelites grew in number, Pharaoh grew in fear. "Behold," Pharaoh declared, "the people of the children of Israel are more and mightier than we. Come, let us deal shrewdly with them." Taskmasters were appointed, whips cracked, bricks without straw, days without mercy. But even under suffering, the Hebrews multiplied. So Pharaoh issued a decree, chilling and ruthless. Every male child born to the Hebrews must be thrown into the Nile. A mother weeps in silence. A father prays in defiance. From the tribe of Levi, a child is born, a baby boy. For 3 months they hide him, a fragile, secret hope in the heart of a cruel kingdom. But when they can hide him no longer, the mother prepares a basket made of papyrus, coated with tar and pitch, watertight, prayer-soaked. She places her son inside and sets him gently among the reeds of the Nile. The current carries not just a child, but a promise. His sister, Miriam, watches from a distance. Her eyes scan the horizon. Will the river claim him? Will soldiers find him? But then, the daughter of Pharaoh comes to bathe at the river. She sees the basket. She opens it and the baby weeps. Moved with compassion, she says, "This is one of the Hebrews' children." And just then, Miriam steps forward, bold and brave, and offers, "Shall I go and call a Hebrew woman to nurse the child for you?" And so the baby is returned by God's own orchestration to his mother's arms. She nurses him, she names him quietly in her heart. But when the time comes, she gives him up again, this time to the house of Pharaoh. And Pharaoh's daughter gives him a name, Moses, because I drew him out of the water. And the child grew, and she brought him to Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son, and she called his name Moses. Raised in the courts of kings, but born of slaves, Moses lived between two worlds, Hebrew by birth, Egyptian by upbringing. Yet his heart could not ignore the cries of his people. One day, he saw an Egyptian beating a Hebrew slave, and in a moment of anger and identity, he struck the Egyptian down and buried him in the sand. The next day, word had spread. Fear crept in. Pharaoh would hear of it. And so Moses fled to the wilderness of Midian, a fugitive, a shepherd, a life reset, but not forgotten. The deliverer had been born, preserved from the Nile, protected in Pharaoh's house. But his time had not yet come. For now, he would wait in the wilderness until the voice of God called from the fire. Years passed. Egypt continued its brutal grip over the Hebrews. But in the wilderness of Midian, a man wandered far from the world he once knew. Moses, once a prince of Egypt, was now a shepherd, tending flocks not his own and a land not his own. He had taken a wife, Zipporah, and become a father. He was a fugitive, but in the eyes of God, he was a man in preparation. One ordinary day, Moses led his sheep beyond the wilderness to Mount Horeb, the mountain of God. There, something caught his eye, something strange. A bush, ablaze with fire, yet not consumed. He turned aside to see this great sight, and as he drew near, a voice called from the midst of the flames, "Moses, Moses!" And he said, "Here I am." Then the voice replied, "Do not come any closer. Take off your sandals, for the place where you stand is holy ground. I am the God of your father, the God of Abraham, the God of Isaac, and the God of Jacob." And Moses hid his face, for he was afraid to look upon God. But the Lord said, "I have surely seen the affliction of my people who are in Egypt. I have heard their cry, I know their sorrows, and I have come down to deliver them, to bring them up out of that land to a good and broad land, flowing with milk and honey. Come now, therefore, and I will send you to Pharaoh, that you may bring my people, the children of Israel, out of Egypt." But Moses trembled. He looked upon himself, not a warrior, not a leader, just a shepherd. And he asked, "Who am I that I should go to Pharaoh?" And God answered with the promise, not of Moses' strength, but of God's presence. "I will be with you, and this will be the sign to you. When you have brought the people out of Egypt, you will worship me on this mountain." Moses, still unsure, asked, "When I go to the people of Israel and say, 'The God of your fathers has sent me to you,' and they ask, 'What is his name?' what shall I say?" And from the fire came one of the most sacred revelations in all of Scripture. "I am who I am. Tell them, I am has sent me to you, the God of Abraham, the eternal one, the living God, not bound by time or name, but sovereign over all." Still, Moses wrestled with doubt. But what if they won't believe me? So God gave him signs: his staff turning into a serpent, his hands becoming leprous and healed again. And if that were not enough, water from the Nile would turn to blood. Yet Moses replied, "But I am slow of speech. I am not eloquent." And the Lord said, "Who made man's mouth? Who gives speech or sight or hearing? Is it not I, the Lord?" Still, Moses pleaded, "O Lord, please send someone else." The anger of the Lord burned. But in mercy, he answered, "Your brother Aaron is coming. He will speak for you. You shall be as God to him. Take the staff in your hand. With it, you shall perform my wonders." And so Moses returned to his household. He took his wife and sons and set out for Egypt, staff in hand, fire in his memory. The wilderness had refined him. The flame had called him. The deliverer would now face the kingdom that once raised him. The desert wind followed Moses back to Egypt, but he no longer came as a fugitive. He came as a prophet, with a message from the one who rules heaven and earth. Beside him stood Aaron, his brother, his voice before Pharaoh. In Moses' hand, a simple staff, soon to become the scepter of judgment. They entered the palace of Pharaoh, the ruler of the world's greatest empire, sandaled feet on marble floors, shepherds before God King. And Moses spoke the words that echoed from the burning bush. Thus says the Lord, the God of Israel, let my people go, that they may hold a feast to me in the wilderness. But Pharaoh, hardened and proud, replied, who was the Lord that I should obey his voice and let Israel go? I do not know the Lord, and moreover, I will not let Israel go. And so began the confrontation of kingdoms, the word of the Lord versus the might of Pharaoh. Egypt would come to know the name of Yahweh, not through persuasion, but through plagues. Plague 1, water to blood. Exodus 7. At God's command, Moses struck the Nile with his staff, and its waters turned to blood. Fish died, the river stank. Egypt's lifeline was struck, yet Pharaoh's heart was unmoved. Plague 2, frogs. Exodus 8. Frogs poured over the land, in ovens, in beds, in palaces. They croaked in Pharaoh's ears by day and night. Pray to your God, Pharaoh pleaded, and I will let your people go. But when the frogs were gone, Pharaoh hardened his heart. Plague 3, gnats. Exodus 8. Dust turned to gnats, swarming eyes and mouths, a plague from the ground itself. The magicians of Egypt cried, this is the finger of God. But Pharaoh would not listen. Plague 4, swarms of flies. Flies darkened the sky and filled every Egyptian home, but not in the land of Goshen, where Israel dwelt. God had drawn a line. Plague 5, livestock die. Exodus 9. Horses, camels, cattle, donkeys, all struck dead in a single day. Wealth, transportation, food collapsed. Yet Pharaoh remained proud. Plague 6, boils and sores. Moses threw soot into the air, and boils broke out across Egypt. Even the magicians could not stand before Moses. Still, Pharaoh refused. Plague 7, hail and fire. Exodus 9, verses 13 through 35. A storm like Egypt had never seen. Fire mingled with ice, trees shattered, crops destroyed. I have sinned, Pharaoh whispered. Pray to your God. But when the storm ceased, so did his repentance. Plague 8, locusts. Exodus 10. Clouds of locusts consume the fields, the trees, the vines. What hail had left, the locusts devoured. Egypt's gods of harvest were helpless, but Pharaoh remained defiant. Plague 9, darkness. Exodus 10. For 3 days, a darkness so thick it could be felt. But in Goshen, there was light. Pharaoh shouted, "Go, but leave your flocks." Moses answered, "Not a hoof will be left behind." Pharaoh's rage burned. "The day you see my face again, you will die." And Moses replied, "So be it. I will not see your face again." Plague 10, death of the firstborn. Exodus 11 through 12. One final plague, one final word of warning. About midnight, The Lord will go out through Egypt, and every firstborn shall die, from Pharaoh's son to the lowest servant. But God gave instructions to Israel, a lamb, spotless and slain, its blood painted on doorposts. When I see the blood, God said, I will pass over you. And at midnight, the cry of Egypt rose, a sound no ear had heard before. In every Egyptian home, there was death. But in the homes covered by the blood, there was life. Exodus 12:30. There was a great cry in Egypt, for there was not a house where someone was not dead. Release at last. Exodus 12:31 through 36. Pharaoh summoned Moses and Aaron by night. Rise, go, take your flocks and your herds, and bless me also. After 430 years in Egypt, the children of Israel marched out, free, not as slaves escaping, but as a people redeemed. And God went before them, a pillar of cloud by day and a pillar of fire by night. Egypt had been humbled, Israel had been chosen, and Moses, once a child of the Nile, was now the voice of God, leading a nation out of darkness. Remember this day, for by strength of hand the Lord brought you out of Egypt. A night unlike any other had come to pass. From the darkness of Egypt, a light began to move. A nation, numbering in the hundreds of thousands, walked into the unknown, bearing no swords, no shields, only unleavened bread and the bones of Joseph. But above them burned a pillar of fire, and before them walked their deliverer. Exodus 13:21. And the Lord went before them by day in a pillar of cloud to guide them, and by night in a pillar of fire to give them light. The Exodus had begun. They left Ramses for Succoth, Succoth for Etham, each step pulling them farther from bondage and closer to the promise. The trap at the sea. But then the path turned. God led them toward the sea, the Red Sea. Behind them, word reached Pharaoh. The Israelites are wandering, trapped in the wilderness. Pharaoh's heart, once broken, now hardened again. With fury, he gathered 600 of his best chariots, his army, his vengeance, his pride, and gave chase. From the horizon came the sound of hooves, wheels, war. Exodus 14:10. And when Pharaoh drew near, the children of Israel lifted their eyes, and behold, the Egyptians marched after them. So they were afraid. Fear and doubt. Exodus 14:10 through 14. Surrounded by mountains, the sea before them, an army behind them, the people cried out in terror. Was it because there were no graves in Egypt that you brought us here to die? Did we not tell you to leave us alone? But Moses stood tall, not in his own strength, but in the Lord's promise. Moses' voice. Do not be afraid. Stand still and see the salvation of the Lord, which he will accomplish for you today. For the Egyptians whom you see today, you shall see again, no more, forever. The Lord will fight for you, and you shall hold your peace. The miracle unfolds. Exodus 14:15 through 22. God spoke to Moses, "Why do you cry to me? Tell the people to move forward and lift up your staff." Moses stretched out his hand over the sea, and the Lord sent a mighty east wind all that night, and the waters were parted. Exodus 14:22. So the children of Israel went into the midst of the sea on dry ground, and the waters were a wall to them on their right and on their left. The fire of the Lord held the Egyptians back, and in the heart of the sea, a path of deliverance opened wide. Mothers led children, elders leaned on staffs. Faith carried them where fear had once reigned. The pursuit and the judgment. Exodus 14:23 through 28. But Pharaoh's pride was not yet silenced. Into the sea he drove his chariots. Into the miracle he chased them. Then, in the dawn's early light, God moved again. He threw the Egyptian army into confusion. Their wheels jammed, their pace faltered. And the Lord said to Moses, "Stretch out your hand over the sea that the waters may return." Moses lifted his staff once more, and the walls of the sea collapsed. Exodus 14:28. Not so much as one of them remained. Egypt's pride was buried beneath the waves. The Song of Deliverance. Exodus 15. And on the far side of the Red Sea, the people stood in awe, free, alive, and trembling before the majesty of their God. Moses sang, "I will sing to the Lord, for he has triumphed gloriously. The horse and its rider he has thrown into the sea." And Miriam the prophetess took her tambourine, and all the women followed her with dancing. "Sing to the Lord," she cried, "for he is highly exalted." Into the wilderness. Exodus 15:22. From the sea, they walked into the desert of Shur. Not yet home, not yet a nation, but they were no longer slaves. They were the people of God. Exodus 14:31. And when Israel saw the great power the Lord used against the Egyptians, the people feared the Lord and put their trust in him and in his servant, Moses.
The sea was behind them. The wilderness stretched before them. Israel, delivered by power, preserved by mercy, now journeyed toward a deeper calling. They were not merely freed from Egypt. They were being called to God himself. The wilderness journey. Exodus 15 through 18. 3 days into the desert, the songs of deliverance turned to murmurs of thirst. The water was bitter. The food was gone. The people grumbled. But the Lord provided manna from heaven, water from the rock, quail in the evening, daily bread for a wandering people, daily tests of faith. In Rephidim, they faced their first enemy, the Amalekites. While Joshua fought, Moses stood upon a hilltop, staff raised. As his arms were lifted, Israel prevailed. So Aaron and Hur supported his hands, and Joshua defeated Amalek with the edge of the sword. Then, on the third new moon after leaving Egypt, they arrived at the foot of Mount Sinai, the mountain of God. Exodus 19. The desert grew silent. A mountain stood before them, rugged, immovable, wrapped in mystery. And the Lord said to Moses, "Tell the people, you have seen what I did to Egypt and how I bore you on eagle's wings. If you obey my voice and keep my covenant, you shall be my treasured possession among all peoples." For 3 days the people prepared. They washed their garments. They abstained from defilement. And on the third morning, there were thunders and lightnings, and a thick cloud on the mountain, and a very loud trumpet blast, so that all the people trembled. Mount Sinai was covered in smoke. Fire descended. The whole mountain shook violently, and the voice of God thundered like the storm. The people stood at a distance, afraid to draw near. But Moses ascended. The 10 Commandments, Exodus 20. From the fire, from the smoke, came 10 words. A covenant not written in sand or in scrolls, but in stone and in the soul of a people. I am the Lord your God, who brought you out of Egypt, out of the house of slavery. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. Honor your father and your mother. You shall not murder. You shall not commit adultery. You shall not steal. You shall not bear false witness. You shall not covet. Now when all the people saw the thunder and flashes of lightning, they trembled and stood far off. And they said to Moses, "You speak to us, and we will listen, but do not let God speak to us, lest we die." And Moses said, "Do not be afraid, for God has come to test you, that the fear of him may be before you, so that you may not sin." The covenant sealed. Exodus 24. After Moses received the law, he came down from the mountain and wrote all the words of the Lord. The people responded with one voice, "All that the Lord has spoken, we will do, and we will be obedient." And so Moses built an altar at the base of the mountain. He took the blood of the sacrifice and sprinkled it upon the people. "Behold, the blood of the covenant that the Lord has made with you." Then Moses ascended once more into the cloud, into the fire, into the glory. And Moses was on the mountain 40 days and 40 nights. There, God would reveal not just laws, but patterns for worship, designs for the tabernacle, the ark, and the priesthood. Moses, friend of God. Exodus 33:11. Moses would not only speak for God, he would speak with him. And the Lord would speak to Moses face to face, as a man speaks to a friend. From a basket in the Nile to a mountaintop of fire, from exile to encounter. Moses' life had become a bridge between heaven and earth, between God and his people. And the covenant at Sinai would echo through all generations, until another mountain, until another deliverer, until grace came down once more. The covenant had been given, the mountain had spoken, yet the journey was not over. The promised land lay ahead, but between Sinai and Canaan stretched 40 years of testing, wandering, and waiting. The wilderness begins. Exodus 32 through 33. Even before Moses descended from Mount Sinai with the commandments, the people's hearts turned. They cried to Aaron, "Make us gods who will go before us." And from their gold, a calf was shaped. They worshipped the image and said, "These are your gods, O Israel." Moses shattered the tablets. Judgment fell. 3,000 died by the sword. Yet even then, Moses interceded. Exodus 32:32. "Lord, forgive their sin, but if not, blot me out of your book." And God answered, "Not with destruction, but with renewal."
a new covenant was given. The tabernacle was built, and God's glory descended to dwell among his people. Years of wandering, Numbers 11 through 20. But the years that followed were marked by grumbling, rebellion, and loss. In the wilderness, the people longed for Egypt. They accused Moses. They questioned God. Spies were sent into Canaan. 10 brought fear. 2 brought faith. The people chose fear and were sentenced to 40 years of wandering. Even Moses, who struck the rock in anger instead of speaking to it, was told, Numbers 20:12, "You shall not bring this assembly into the land that I have given them." Miriam died, then Aaron. The first generation passed away in the sands of the desert.
The bronze serpent and God's mercy. Numbers 21. Once more, the people complained, and serpents came among them, biting, killing. But again, God provided a way. Make a fiery serpent and set it on a pole, and everyone who looks upon it shall live. Moses lifted the bronze serpent high, and those who looked in faith were healed. A picture of healing not by effort, but by faith. A shadow of a greater lifting yet to come. The final mountain, Deuteronomy 32 through 34. 40 years passed. A new generation stood at the edge of the Jordan River. Moses, now 120 years old, was still strong in spirit, his eyes undimmed. Deuteronomy 34, 1 through 4. The Lord took him up to Mount Nebo, to the top of Pisgah, and showed him all the land, north to the hills of Galilee, west to the Mediterranean Sea, south to the wilderness, the land promised to Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. But Moses would not enter it. Deuteronomy 34, 5 through 6. So Moses, the servant of the Lord, died there, and he buried him in the valley. No man knows his grave. No monument marks the spot. Only a mountain and the memory of a life surrendered to God. The legacy of Moses. Moses was not just a deliverer. He was a lawgiver, a prophet, a servant. He spoke with God face to face. He led slaves to freedom and a nation to covenant. Deuteronomy 34:10. There has not arisen a prophet since in Israel like Moses, whom the Lord knew face to face. Yet his story did not end in death. For generations later, on another mountain, in the land he never entered, Moses would stand again, this time beside Jesus. Luke 9:30. And behold, 2 men talked with him, Moses and Elijah, who appeared in glory. The law came through Moses. Grace and truth came through Christ. And the voice from the mountain still speaks. This is my beloved Son. Listen to him.